just going to go ahead and state my opinion that the Enneagram as a personality type system is fine when it's actually relevant to a particular topic. But, and I've said this in other videos, I think far too many people who are into the Enneagram talk about it like it's the answer to everything. And I realize, MBTI people, socionics people do the same thing, but at least for the most part, they talk about those typing systems for what they actually are. Personality type systems based on the combinations of Carl Jung's cognitive functions and how those functions play out in conjunction with each other. Enneagram people's topics are just all over the place, and like just like any aspect of their lives, like, oh, is this a type 6 thing or is this a type 2 thing? And it's like they ignore what the Enneagram theory is actually talking about. And I've noticed this in the times that I've spent in both MBTI and Enneagram forums. I find myself forcing MBTI into Enneagram conversations way more than the other way around, which just kind of tells me that the Enneagram just doesn't cover nearly as much of one's personality as MBTI or socionics or other Jungian based theories. Now, the people who say they like the Enneagram a lot more than MBTI are generally the ones who have not been successful at figuring out the MBTI type. And that's completely understandable. I didn't get into MBTI my first several times of taking a test and getting the wrong type. It's like you take a test, it tells you, oh, you're this type, and you read the type description, and you go, oh, I guess that's kind of me, I don't know. And then you just kind of don't think anything of it. Or, common thing that happens to everyone, you take more than one test and you get a different result each time, or you're on the border between T and F, or on the border between J and P, and you don't set out with a goal of figuring out your type. It's like you just stumble upon this test and nothing about the experience jumps out at you, so there's no incentive to investigate it further. And yet somehow these people just happen to take an Enneagram test, they read the description of the type they got, and it just immediately connects with them, like an instant revelation. So that's the personality type system that they latch onto. And it did take me a long time to figure out my MBTI type. It took me a long time to figure out my Enneagram type. And in each case, I didn't actually develop a strong interest in it until I did figure out my actual type. Now with MBTI, a big breakthrough for me in figuring out my type was when I was finally able to separate my natural preferences from the way other people had taught me to be. And knowing what I know now from studying the Enneagram and knowing that I'm a type 9, I can see that that was probably the common type 9 merging aspect, taking on the traits of the influential people in your life and thinking that's who you actually are. When taking the MBTI tests, I would say yes to a lot of the J questions because growing up I was taught that the J way was the better way to do things, whereas P is more my natural preference, and so that's what I actually am. I'm an ISTP. I was scoring ISTJ on a lot of those earlier tests when I'm actually an ISTP. Once I finally figured out that I'm an ISTP, that's when I really got interested in MBTI and personality types. Back in those earlier days, I was especially interested in the aspect of MBTI that focuses on your true natural preferences as opposed to the persona that you take on from your life experiences. And I didn't know Enneagram back then. I had no idea I was a type 9, but looking back now, I can definitely see that that was a merging thing for me. So to me, it's understandable that a lot of type 9s especially would have that same sort of experience with MBTI. They would have trouble figuring out their type, why they were able to figure out the Enneagram type so easily. I'd say they just got lucky. They just happened to stumble across an Enneagram type description that described them. But unfortunately, that still leads to a lot of Enneagram discussions online that are actually, in fact, not Enneagram related at all. And like I said, I often find myself injecting MBTI into Enneagram discussions just because I see the topic as more MBTI related than Enneagram related. For example, someone might post in the Enneagram 9 forum asking if other 9s have cluttered homes. And, my first thought is like, well, that's going to be split down the middle. And I have seen that. That topic has come up more than once, and it's always split down the middle. And, I see it as more of a J versus P thing, or, to be more specific with cognitive functions, people with high introverted sensing, are basically the SJ types, ISTJ, ISFJ, ESTJ, ESFJ. Those particular MBTI types are the ones that are most likely to keep a clean home. And other times it's not so much split down the middle, but rather things that people attribute to type 9 traits or some other Enneagram type trait is actually more of an NF trait. People with intuitive and feeling preferences in Myers-Briggs. And that's just because it just so happens that NF types, by their very nature, are the ones most likely to be interested in Enneagram types. And so they're the ones that are identifying themselves as Enneagram type 9s on the Enneagram 9 forums. And then, the majority of the people will respond to a question like, oh, yes, that's totally me. And so everyone ends up thinking these are type 9 traits. They don't even, a lot of them don't even bother like exploring the other Enneagram types. They just want to get confirmation from other 9s that other 9s can relate to this. Like, oh yeah, we 9s are empathetic, and we experience this brain fog and disconnection from reality. And I'm like, those sound more like NF traits to me. And I say this because I'm an ISTP and I don't relate to those traits. I'm much more grounded in reality as a sensory thinking type. Enneagram type 9 is about being a peacemaker, avoiding conflict, having a main motivation of wanting to maintain peace in your life. That's it. That's what Enneagram 9 is. All this stuff about empathy and brain fog and having all these wandering thoughts and deep sense of morals, daydreaming a lot, wanting to spend all their free time in bed with a book. Those are all classic INFP traits. There are actual aspects of the INFP personality type, the cognitive functions, introverted feeling, and extroverted intuition, that explain why these are INFP traits. Enneagram theory doesn't explain those traits. It just so happens that a lot of Enneagram type 9s relate to that because a lot of INFP 9s identify themselves as 9s. Me being an ISTP 9, I don't relate to those traits. I'm much more grounded in reality. I think logically. I'm much more analytical. When I read about these topics on the Enneagram 9 forums, I'm one of my most common responses is, that's not a 9 thing. I'm an ISTP. I don't relate to this. And usually they ignore me. They don't care. They just, all they really, it turns out that all they really want is their own experiences to be validated. And so most of the other people relate to them. That's all they care about. Typical INFP. I mean, sometimes it is a combination of Enneagram and MBTI. This thing about 9s supposedly being in tune with other people's needs. Well, being a type 9 is probably the motivator in this type of thing. Type 9s wanting to please the people in their lives, and so they're motivated to want to be in tune with other people's needs. But the ability to do that comes from our preferred cognitive functions. And again, it goes back to intuition and feeling functions. INFJs especially tend to be great at this. The combination of introverted intuition and extroverted feeling makes them especially great at being able to know and anticipate and understand other people's needs. Me, again, ISTP, introverted thinking, extroverted sensing, being logical and objective in my approach, and focusing on concrete details. I basically suck at knowing what other people need without them telling me. Now, if somebody does tell me that they need something from me, my instinct is to jump in and help them with it. That's my instinctive response as a type 9. But I'm generally not going to know what people need unless they tell me. So that's why I would love it if more people who are into the Enneagram would also take the time to learn about MBTI and use that in some of their discussions. But like I said, a big reason why they don't is because they struggle to figure out their MBTI type, and so they're just not that motivated to do so. But in a lot of those cases, I can actually get them past the issues that are preventing them from figuring out their type. You know, most common one is, you know, they get different results each time they take the test, or their percentages in each of the dichotomies are like right in the middle, so they don't know which way to go. And a lot of that is because they just don't take the test with the right mindset. You have to answer the questions based on how you naturally are overall throughout most periods of your life, not just how you happen to feel that day, or how other people expect you to behave, or how you're required to act at work, you know, or how you were raised, or whatever. It's about you, how you naturally are. And yeah, like I said, this is the part that's hard for a lot of nines to figure out, you know, because of the whole merging with others aspect. You know, it makes it difficult for them to separate their own natural preferences for how others have influenced them to be. But, you know, I figure, you know, they've come this far in their growth as a type 9, so, you know, just do a little bit more introspection. Figure, you know, think back to the various things that have influenced you into being who you are today. Try to imagine if you won the lottery and then you had, you know, all this time to yourself and you had the ability to live your life exactly how you want to, you know, then how would you answer these questions? But anyway, this video isn't supposed to be about how to figure out your MBTI type. My main point right now is just do it. And never mind the fact that this benefits me more than it does you, because you relate to the Enneagram 9 discussions and I don't. I'm just going to go ahead and state my opinion that how they can get past the issues that are preventing them from